so I figured, man, are there any tools out there that can help me connect on-chain Bitcoin activity directly to QuickBooks? Kind of blew my mind at the beginning. There's nothing that looked like a normal bank statement out there for us to tie back to. We started with, you put in an address into our tool and it spits out a bank statement, $200 de minimis rule. If that were to pass and it'd stay at the $200 limit, that would mean that anything under that limit, any specific transaction under that limit, there's no taxes and there's no reporting. You go buy your coffee with Bitcoin, you go buy a beer at the park with Bitcoin, and there's no issues.
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by Polaris Payments. Let's face it, for now, businesses still need to accept fiat and credit cards. Polaris Payments helps with all your credit card processing needs using a consultative approach. Think of Polaris like a performance coach, helping take your business to the next level when it comes to accepting all forms of money. For more information about Polaris Payments, visit polarispayments.com. Now let's get back to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Medium of Exchange podcast. Today, Jack and I are excited to welcome Jordan Guess. Jordan's a CPA at Trusted Advisors and co-founder of Bitment, a Bitcoin native accounting and tax tool. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Excited to get to know you guys a little bit more, and kind of just talk through what we're all building on. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about so you got the traditional CPA firm at Trusted Advisors. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
And then you're building a really cool product at Bitment. Tell us a little bit about kind of your background and what you're building.
Sure. So I started my own CPA firm in 2020 and I did public accounting prior to that at a small firm in Louisville, and then left to go try corporate accounting. And while I was in corporate accounting, got my CPA license. Basically had some friends, family reach out from that prior firm to see if I would continue doing their tax stuff. So that I fell into doing the tax firm on my own. I didn't set out to do that. Built it on the side for about a year while working at that W-2 job. And then about 12, 13 months later, left and just went full time. So I've been full time since, I guess, tail end of 2020. And then that would have been about the same time I got into Bitcoin. So I would have started listening to the Sailor series from Breedlove probably December of 2020, and didn't finish it until probably March, or at least the first 10 episodes or whatever. So that's what really got me down the rabbit hole. Of course, I'd heard about Bitcoin before that, but had not really done much research. Very similar story to most. Dismissed it, did not do my research as quickly as I should have. But what's interesting, I think, about my story was during that run up, in 21 and all the craziness, I started to take on clients that were in the Bitcoin space, and then inevitably in other parts of crypto world as well. But I was like, well, I do work for NFT projects just because they need the help, but I'm a Bitcoiner at heart. And Bitcoiners sometimes are very boring clients for me because they're just buy and hold and there's no tax consequences, at least in the short term. So yeah, I'll pause there. That's kind of my background of how I've gotten into the space. And then, yeah, I'm happy to talk more about Bitment because that was born out of, I can talk about that now or however, that was born out of a situation with the CPA firm. So
tell us about that situation.
Yeah, so I brought on a Bitcoin miner. He was my first Bitcoin client. Classic, hit me up probably like 4 or 5 days prior to the extension deadline. So this would have been sometime in October. And it would probably have been 2022. And needed the books. He needed his QuickBooks cleaned up, and we needed to file the taxes, and we barely had any time to do it. But he DM'd me on Twitter, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool. I've never done this before." So I jumped in. We had to make his QuickBooks accurate, which involved pulling in all the mining revenue from CSV imports, and then making sure that we accounted for all of the machine purchases and getting that on depreciation schedule. And that whole experience was like, it was fine. It was just very time intensive. And so I figured, man, are there any tools out there that can help me connect on-chain Bitcoin activity directly to QuickBooks? Because if you're not familiar, Plaid does a pretty good job of connecting all bank and credit cards, directly into QuickBooks, and it's fairly straightforward. So whereas I quickly learned that there is no great way. And even yesterday, I had a pretty long conversation with Joe Wood at Satoshi Pacioli. That's why I was down in Nashville yesterday to just continue down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin accounting. And so, anyways, our tool right now, what we have set out to do, the very interim or at the very beginning, is just build a Bitcoin bank statement. Kind of blew my mind at the beginning that there's nothing like that out there because we use bank statements to do bookkeeping very regularly in traditional accounting. So there's nothing that looked like a normal bank statement out there for us to tie back to. And the purpose for that is in the books. It's to ensure there's no duplicates, ensure there's nothing missing from the transactions, right? So we started with you put in an XPub or you put in an address into our tool and it spits out a bank statement. And then you from there you can manipulate that bank statement to be whatever month you're trying to, zoom in on, or year or quarter, whatever it might be, last year. So that's where we started, and then where we're going from there is plugging that code base into QuickBooks to basically feed any on-chain. Again, right now we're just doing on-chain just to kind of get started, try to get to market. But feeding the on-chain transactions into QuickBooks so that an accountant like Joe or myself can more easily categorize those transactions and keep clean books for a Bitcoin miner or for someone using Zapwrite to bill out for their services or goods that they're selling. So,
So is it going to show line by line in QuickBooks every transaction? Because right now, I mean, I have to send all my bank statements for my rental properties, for my businesses, all to my bookkeeper. She
mhm.
plugs it all into QuickBooks, reconciles, makes sure it's all correct. So we can have that for Bitcoin, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So how we're trying to do it right now is you would have there's a for review page. So that's where you kind of you would place the vendor or the customer name, and then you also categorize it, whether it's a contractor expense or it's mining revenue. And then you click add, and right now that would send a journal entry into QuickBooks. And then it'd be wallet by wallet that would be mapped to the correct chart of account within QuickBooks. And we're starting with QuickBooks really just because that's where everyone is. Um, but we're not, I would say long term, we have a grander vision of probably building a QuickBooks competitor that is just Bitcoin native, that supports eCash Lightning on chain. Potentially, I mean, we could talk about maybe the Taproot thing. Like, to me, the only one that makes the most sense right now is maybe adding Tether support just because it's so widely used for payments and sending money. So that's kind of where we're at right now is hooking into QuickBooks, meeting customers where they're at. And I really, I have met the Zapwrite guys, and I feel like there's a bit of a hurdle to actually get mass adoption for their product in that it's great to send invoices out and get paid in Bitcoin, right? But if I'm having to then explain to my bookkeeper or my accountant that, hey, I've got this revenue coming in a totally different way, and we've got to account for that, God forbid, like on a sales tax return as well as an income tax return, it gets complicated quickly. And so we're trying to make it where there's no hurdles. A small business owner could incorporate Bitcoin into their technology stack, and it would still be a seamless experience for the people that, do accounting for them on the back end.
So, in QuickBooks, like, forgive me if this is like a dumb question since I'm not an accountant, but is this showing up on the P&L or the balance sheet or both? Like, is this viewed as an asset that's on the balance sheet when people are accepting Bitcoin, or are we showing like income and expenses? How does that work?
Yeah, so it would be set up. You would just set up your Bitcoin wallet, most likely as a bank account or even as a current asset, but it would be in the asset section. And so since it's double entry accounting, one side always would hit that asset account, whether it's going up or down, and then the other side would hit an expense account or a revenue account, or say a business owner had to contribute Bitcoin into the business from maybe a personal wallet. Okay, so that's going to hit an equity account. So all that to say, to answer your question, it hits both. So if
Yeah.
we bring in mining revenue, that's going to increase our balance on the balance sheet, but then it's going to also hit revenue on the P&L.
Hmm. Yeah, when I think about like people asking, is Bitcoin money or is Bitcoin an asset, an investment?
Hmm.
And then I start thinking about, these different reports you can generate in QuickBooks. Um,
Yeah.
and the answer is it's both. It's an asset and it's money, I guess. Um,
Yeah, I mean, from an accounting standpoint, it's definitely an asset. Um, one kind of interesting uh, piece that I've thought a lot about is more businesses that are transacting in Bitcoin and holding a treasury actually want to measure their success in Bitcoin terms. And my use case for why I set out to make this product originally was I just need to get it on the tax return. And everything on the tax return is dollar denominated, right? And so it whenever you receive income in Bitcoin, like at the time you receive it, the dollar conversion, that's what you mark as income. And likewise with the expense. So that's how our software does everything right now. But I do envision a world where, and I think that's why we might have our hand forced to create a QuickBooks competitor, um, because businesses might want to toggle their balance sheet to see, well, what does my balance sheet look like today? And maybe we do a comparison to a year ago. So what's grown? Have assets grown? Have liabilities gone down or liabilities up? We want to see that comparison, but maybe I want to see it in dollars, but I also want to see it in sats, to see like, is my business growing, on a Bitcoin standard? And so that is the other piece. Right now, there's no sats support in QuickBooks. There is Bitcoin multi-currency, but it only goes out two decimal places. It's basically unusable unless you're
you
just
seen,
dealing with very large numbers.
have you seen Kubera? Um, it's kind of a
No, I don't think so.
it's a net worth tracker for like high net worth individuals and family offices, but you can
Okay.
denominate your net worth in Bitcoin.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so it's
I had not
interesting
seen that.
because uh
Hmm.
I have real estate, I have Bitcoin, I have businesses, and it's just it's interesting seeing the dynamics. It's one of the aha moments that I had realizing I need to get rid of some of my real estate.
Hmm.
Uh, because my net worth was going down over time when I denominate in Bitcoin because I have so much real estate. It's like I need to get
Yeah.
rid of this. And but
Yeah. No, we could talk. I mean, there's a few different directions we could go with real estate. And what's been one thing that's been interesting in this whole journey is that I've met so many more Bitcoiners because I'm a part of this small team that's building this product. I mean, so we have two software engineers, kind of front end, back end, that are working on building building out my dream or whatever, right? Um, and then I'm more so the sales guy, but also the accounting guy to know, this is what the product needs to actually do and accomplish. So, but all that to say, I've done a ton of events. Joining up at Bitcoin Park in January was the best money we probably will ever spend in this business, I think, just because of the high quality connections that I've been able to make and get really good feedback from people who I think are prospective customers. Uh, whether it's Joe at Satoshi Pacioli or it's downstream, something like OpenSats that's paying out contractors all over the world, and we need to be able to track that, right? So, anyways, all that to say, meeting people in Nashville, in Austin, going to some different conferences this year already has just been great. I told my wife, I was like, even if Bitment doesn't work out, the amount of people that I've been able to add to my Rolodex has just been mind-boggling, and it's just been a great experience. So,
Yeah, no, I mean all incredible to hear, and it's really interesting in what you're building out. And I think one of the pieces that you mentioned the Zaprite guys and some of the things that they've talked about too is like understanding what Bitcoiners need first in order to bring these products to market. And you're taking a really interesting approach because you, to what you were just describing, understand what Bitcoiners need, but also have played in the other side where like what works with QuickBooks and how this works out. So the question that I've been thinking of is as you lead that transformation, what are some of those ways that you're getting people to understand this is why you need to do it now with the current system that we have in QuickBooks, but here's where we're going in the future and how it will be better. Like what are some of the pain points that people are bringing up that helps you kind of understand the customer's need and identify that there's an opportunity for that in the market.
Yeah, I would say right now, what ends up happening is you potentially run two parallel books. You run a Bitcoin, you've got your kind of Bitcoin books, and then you've got your fiat books. And that's really not helpful for anyone because I get, it's not impossible to combine those by way of probably building a Excel template that you drop the two P&Ls in, and then it combines it manually for you. But that's the biggest, like one of the bigger pieces is I want everything in one spot, especially if I'm an investor in a Bitcoin startup. Obviously, we have tax and down the road there will be more audit compliance that has to happen for businesses as they grow, and so that's been one piece. And then, you hear this whole debate that I mean, even just this year, going to some of the events and listening to guys like Parker Lewis at Zappright talk about, well, is Bitcoin going to fail if it's not used as medium of exchange? Um, and I think that right now, it's if we don't have the tooling to back up the accounting piece, it's such a headache for a small business owner to make that jump that they're just not going to do it. A great example, I think, and one more thing to answer your question is like, credit card processing fees. As I'm talking to my barber when he cuts my hair, and we're kind of just talking because I do his stuff as well. And, you get talking about, oh, the 3% credit card processing fee, like it adds up for even a small business that may only be grossing, 100 or $200,000 a year. They have fairly high margins, service business, but it adds up. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, dang, if we could just put an iPad out, like what we have at Bitcoin Park, right? You plug in the dollar amount and you pay over Lightning. But that small business owner, like he's not a Bitcoiner, right? His whole thing is, dude, if you could figure out a way to save me 3% on my gross receipts across the board, well, I'm interested in that. I don't care about Bitcoin, but I that helps me, you know, potentially take a nicer vacation or save up for an engagement ring or whatever it is, right? So that's where I'm just trying to meet normies, honestly, where they're at with the whole
Mhm.
Bitcoin play. Because I've talked to enough Bitcoiners and sure, we can go down a rabbit hole of like privacy and a lot of different things that Bitcoiners are very passionate about, and all those things I think are great. But when I talk to normal people in my firm, who are just clients who don't touch Bitcoin, it's not really their highest priority. From a privacy standpoint, QuickBooks already has all their data; they're completely doxed. Like so, we're just trying to meet people where they're at and try to onboard them to Bitcoin for the reasons that are important to them and really just make the back end seamless for reporting purposes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I think sometimes in, the Bitcoin space we can get in that a bit of that, echo chamber and trying to really push forward as many of the ideals as we can without really weighing the trade-offs of what it takes to meet people where they're at and what that will look like. And it's very interesting as you're talking to normies and people who aren't interested in the space on what those misconceptions might be, but then also what's realistic for them in order to make that leap. Because to your point, 3% that can add up a lot over time, but if you're just talking about it in a one-off scenario, they'll say, well, I don't really care about 3%, that's a small number. But then if you can show them that with an asset that's appreciating over time, then that
Yeah.
3% actually turns into something that is a much larger like, oh crap, I want to hop on this boat. And it's a constant weighing of the opportunity costs and the pros and cons. But as long as, to your point, if we can have the tools that are as easy as possible, where it's like plug and play, or here's an iPad, scan this QR code, and you're good to go because it's that easy, then it's almost like why not for this person.
Yeah, and I'll speak to one other, another piece that I hear some people talk about, and actually I would probably butt up with Parker on this point, where he makes the point of like the cap gains is not an impediment. And I'm like, in my head, I think the cap gains piece is an impediment. I just do. I mean, I understand that people can get over that, but again, if you're talking to the normie and they're like, look, I already feel kind of overwhelmed because we've got to file this S corp tax return and my personal, and I've got all these moving pieces and I'm trying to make sure we're profitable. Like adding in one more layer of wait, so every time I earn it, and so we have to mark it as revenue at that time. Then if I send it to a contractor, that's considered a sale. And the tooling, the tax tooling right now, I generally send people to cointracker.io, that tool for the cap gains and losses. It's not perfect, and there's no way to reconcile from the accounting standpoint to know again that it's actually accurate. So that's been one of the biggest takeaways is I wasn't focused on the tax when we first got into it. I saw the gaping hole in accounting. And so I said, let's focus on that. But the more conversations I've had, I think tax is something. I mean, we can see, we can dream, we can see what's going to come out of this tax bill that was supposed to pass this month, I guess, by Memorial Day. Besson just came out a few days ago, said that now they're shooting for July 4th for the new tax bill to pass. But, I can kind of dream that, oh, if we got a de minimis rule that was passed through on Bitcoin, that'd be incredible. But realistically, maybe that's a 5 or 10% probability. We're probably a year from now, we're probably still sitting with having to report capital gains on every transaction, even though even though almost no one actually, is fully compliant with that. If I bought a little drink at Bitcoin Park last night. Am I going to actually go that? Of course I am, right? No. So
We'll,
you
we'll
should
edit.
report.
We'll bleep that out.
Well, you should. I'm just saying you should go report it. But I'm just saying, in all reality, it's so difficult to track that right now that
Mhm.
let's just say, even if someone wanted to, it'd be difficult, right?
Is is Bitment
Yeah, and
going to be solving that problem? Like if
I
I am a
think it,
business owner and I pay a contractor and that's, capital gains event.
yeah, yeah. Right now we're focused on getting the QuickBooks piece deployed as quickly as possible. But the cool thing is we will have a lot of cost basis data within our software just because, for example, if a miner receives rewards, we know what that was when they received it. That's their cost basis on those UTXOs. And so depending on um, what cost basis method they're using, we could fairly easily build that for some portion of their transactions. Where it gets tricky is if someone's also purchasing Bitcoin through Swan River, um, Bitcoin Well, whatever it might be. And based on the conversations I've had with some of the people at those exchanges, it's not a high priority for them to build an API with us. And so that makes the user experience.
What about the Strike API?
Yeah, we could probably do it. If there's an API, we could do it. Um, and we would do that because my like perfect world is you log into Bitment, you connect maybe one or two exchange accounts where you've been purchasing, and then that pulls in all of that cost basis data, and then it also connects with any sells if you had to sell any. Because we're really building this tool right this moment for like a miner. They're just like the most obvious kind of customer for us. So they're having to sell, and that creates those capital gain events. So all I'd say, yes, we are going to build that in because I don't think that's going away. I wish it were, but I don't think it's going away. And I think I was a little surprised to hear that so many Bitcoiners were like, I would love you all to do that as well, because I just rather would not use a coin tracker that supports every new coin under the sun, right? And
Mhm.
maybe it wasn't clear enough, but we are Bitcoin only, um, with the small exception potentially for something like Tether, just to get something like that into QuickBooks. But yeah, I would be very surprised if there's anything else that really pops up that makes a lot of sense to add for Bitcoiners.
Well, and it's really interesting that you say the tracking piece because this is, I guess we're coming at it from a different perspective, you being more, in the numbers and in the books. And I look at it more from just like the human behavior side of things.
Hmm.
And when I hear people don't want to spend Bitcoin because of the capital gains tax, it's because of that like mental hurdle of having to pay that tax versus they're holding dollars and it's like you spend a dollar and you don't feel like you're paying an extra tax on that. So I actually really like how Jack Mallers has framed, capital gains tax as actually being a good thing because you're outperforming the fiat, decline. But to what you were just saying, if the tools aren't in place where it's simple enough to track it and be compliant on your whether it's quarterly or annual reports, then yeah, that's going to inhibit it because nobody wants to be outside of compliance when dealing with taxes in the IRS. And I think that's exactly why we're in this period of to repeat what you said, bringing meeting people where they're at and bringing these tools to them, so they have the option. Because once you have the option, I mean, Bitcoiners have shown that we're willing to have two different two different systems going at once. One tracking our Bitcoin holdings, the other tracking our fiat holdings, and just as more people like yourself are getting fully like fully embraced in the space and bringing these tools and products to market, it shows that proof of work of like, no, this is happening and it's coming. And I think as long as that can be as simple and seamless as possible, then people will embrace it, and then that sentiment shifts because the perspective, not necessarily of, oh, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin because I don't want to pay more taxes, changes to, no, I can spend it because I'm outperforming the dollar and my purchasing power is going up, and et cetera, et cetera. so
Yeah,
so that excites me. And I appreciate you kind of giving that overview because I, like I said, I was thinking at it more from, no, I want to pay the capital gains because that means that I am outperforming inflation.
yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely a reporting thing, and it really comes down to tracking the cost basis. I don't know if you all were following at all the whole like safe harbor ruling stuff that came out. It was supposed to go into effect early this year, but then got pushed out. That I think that kind of lit a fire under some of the people that I work with to say I really have to get my cost basis stuff all in order. But that got pushed back now. Again, we'll kind of see where everything goes with the tax bill. Um, but again, I think it is a good thing to be organized with your UTXOs. I mean, it's just good to right to have everything consolidated. And while you do that, maybe we should also go ahead and build a template that shows here's a breakdown of each UTXO subset and the cost basis associated with it, so that yeah, so that it's straightforward. I mean, how I even think
Sounds
about
like
our
a
product.
nightmare. We need
Oh
your
yeah,
product so much, man.
no, I know. I mean, how I think about it is, if you're a day trader and you're using your Fidelity account, right? Fidelity is sending you your 1099s at the end of the year that shows all your activity. And so but Bitcoin obviously doesn't have a centralized issuer, is decentralized. So I think someone has to step in that gap and say, look, we don't control your Bitcoin. You're giving us viewing access only. If you're hardcore about privacy, and I would recommend everyone like just give us a burner email, and we haven't like nailed down exactly the user, whether it's like something like Obscura where it's just a 10-digit account number. Obviously I don't want to know anything about our customer. Like I don't want, if you're good on your privacy on chain, I don't want to know anything about you because I just don't want that liability as a company to know so and so has X amount of Bitcoin, right? So as long as you're good on the on-chain privacy, then there's no problem with giving us the viewing access. The viewing access then builds the reports, and then that's used for all kinds of things. I mean, you'd want to know your activity, and you would want to have that saved in your files. And I'll tell you why in just a second. And then you'd also, yeah, you want all the tax reporting. And, as the number grows, that we could, we're not in a targeted group right this moment because of how the election went in November, but things change very quickly. And so we want to make sure that no matter who's in power, we are all basically protected if the IRS ever were to turn on us and say, we're going to come down really hard, especially because Bitcoin's at 1 million and and maybe we don't think everyone's reporting everything correctly. I want to live in a world where Bitcoiners can say to the IRS, look right here, I can show you exactly how I got to my figures, and here's my proof, here's my backup. Um, but real quick, a quick story, which I didn't, this is another one that I've kind of been building on with a client and trusted advisors. So he's getting audited. Well, he's been under an audit for 1718 for probably like 4 years now. But he, some Bitcoiners, got into shit coins and trading and all that kind of stuff back in 1718. And the IRS came back to him and said, um, we hired Chainalysis, and we're basically, um, we don't agree with what you put on your tax return. And he's like, well, okay. So then he actually hired a tax attorney because, I generally don't do that in my practice, like go and fight the IRS. I'll write letters back and forth, but audits and all that, it's just not something that I have a ton of experience with. So I was fine with him going to, an attorney up in New York who was going to help him fight that. But the problem with it is he doesn't have great proof to go back to the IRS and actually say, no, my cost basis isn't zero. My cost basis is X. Because right now what they're trying to do is tax him on the full gain because he doesn't have great proof to show that what he bought whatever coins at. And then a lot of the exchanges he was using, either they've since shut down their US, you know, their US comp or, I'm trying to say operation, or they're just out of business altogether. But all that to say, the IRS is saying, okay, if you just prove your cost basis. And he's scrambling. He's like, well, I don't know. I'm gonna try. So I hear that story and I think, man, I don't want any Bitcoiners to be in that situation. Let's create reports, have everyone can download PDFs, save them to a local file on their computer or hard drive, and just, yeah, be able to prove exactly what we're reporting on our tax returns. Um, Especially for a normal person, especially for someone in their 50s who's like not an anarchist guy, is like, oh, tear it all down. Someone who's like wealthy and wants to protect their assets and everything be above board, they need these statements for a multitude of reasons. So,
And will it aggregate from multiple exchanges?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's great.
that's a great question because, yeah, for like an individual, the product I see the product being almost no Bitcoiner I know holds all their Bitcoin in one place, right? And so it's spread out for different purposes. And so, yeah, one thing our tool does just for an individual would consolidate all your holdings in onto one like consolidated account statement. And that way, I like it because, okay, now I can go show this to my wife, and she knows exactly the different accounts and the balances and the activity that's moving every which way, right?
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by the Bitcoin Payments Advisor. If you own or run a business and you'd like to accept Bitcoin but don't know how, the Bitcoin Payments Advisor can help. From specific software recommendations and accounting implications to training employees and marketing so your customers know you accept this new form of payment, the Bitcoin Payments Advisor can help simplify your journey in accepting Bitcoin for your business. Check out bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Again, that's bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Now let's get back to the show. You mentioned that to me the other day when we ran into each other at BitBlock Boom. And I
Mhm.
was like, actually, that would be really helpful if I could like show it to my wife and show it to my financial advisor. And just like in that meeting, here's a PDF document and, it'd be really
Yeah,
helpful.
yeah, and then even for it could be stowed within, your estate planning documents as well, or at least could be updated from time to time based on how the holdings have changed. Um, so yeah. I mean, I wish it was something that was already out there. It'd be better to just probably buy it as a as an accountant, um, but yeah, someone's got to build it because there's no central issuer, and so someone has to do the reporting.
So you mentioned the need for better reporting. You mentioned someone needs to step into that gap, that this is a major bottleneck for regular folks, business owners, accepting and trading using this new form of payment, this new form of money. What gave you the courage to build this? I mean, you're taking on a pretty big risk. You could pretty easily just sit there and hodl.
Yeah. Well, okay, so obviously I can't build this product because I'm not technical, and so I had to find a partner to actually do the behind the scenes. And yeah, even with AI, it's I've heard all the stories. Oh yeah, you can like build stuff with AI, but then talk to a couple of people and they're like, well, until it breaks or there's a bug, and then you probably need to have
You
some
can vibe code
tech.
it.
Yeah. Shout out to Marty, by the way. I saw that he put something out yesterday or something. So no, I mean I could have done that. I generally am like, if it's out of my expertise, like if my toilet breaks, I'm not the guy who's gonna go watch a YouTube video. I'm just gonna go hire an expert to go do that. So I found well, I had a good friend from college, Kendall, and we actually did a podcast together about Bitcoin, probably starting in 22, and we're having a lot of fun with that. But I was always like, Kendall, we should like, dude, there's so much opportunity. Maybe we start something. And I've been like pulling at his pant leg to start this specific business for about a year and a half. Um, and he was always too busy. He worked at Coinmetrics for a while, and then he was at TBD for maybe 2 years. And then when they shut down in November, I guess uh, they reached out to all the people on that team and gave them the option to go work elsewhere within Square. And Kindle basically decided to leave. And so called me up and was like, "Oh, I got laid off." And I was like, "This is great." So we kind of got much more serious about what the product would look like. And it's been funny because Kindle's obviously not an accountant and I'm not a developer. So we've to try to, join our brains together to actually hack it together. So, and it sounds like it's actually, Kindle could speak to it much better than I can, but building the indexer to actually convert UTXOs into double entry accounting data, um, it sounds like it's actually a pretty difficult problem to solve. And that's also on our roadmap to open source that data pipeline code that he built because yeah, it might be useful for everyone down the road. So,
I love that.
but I mean, I see a pretty broad, even with banks like that, that's like a home run kind of play for me. Again, I'm not like, I don't love banks, but I think banks are going to custody Bitcoin for their clients, whether that's 1, 2, 3 years down the road. And someone's got to build that statement for their customer accounts. Again, I would just be surprised if they're able to build, bank statements by calling the blockchain and putting that into a customer account using an XPub or or whatever it might be. So I just see a lot of opportunity, whether it's, there's the guys over at Sound HSA, they're trying to build an HSA product. They need the reporting for on-chain Bitcoin. The banks, the insurance companies like Anchor Watch. Yeah, it's one of those things that's like almost so simple, and we take these little bank statements that most people just never even look at. We take it so for granted, but if you're operating in like the traditional finance world, those have to be done, you know?
Well, lenders as well. Like every rental property that I've
Absolutely.
ever bought, like I tried giving them back in the day in 2017, I guess. I tried giving them screenshots of my Coinbase account as like assets, and
Yeah,
they're like, "WTF is this? Like, what? We can't use this, you know? Like, give us a PDF. I need to see a bank statement, you know?"
yeah, absolutely. So. So yeah, I think it's the main thing I'm most excited about is I think all of us want our family members and our friends and our colleagues to be using Bitcoin as quickly as possible because we know how it's changed our lives in, I would say, multiple ways, right? Obviously, it's made us wealthier because it is a better form of money, but then it makes you ask questions that at least I wasn't asking before about a whole slew of topics. And so I want more people using Bitcoin. And I just want all the tooling to be built as quickly as possible to make it where there's no impediment. You don't have any excuse to not use Bitcoin. So
I'm so happy that you exist, Jordan, that you took the leap.
yeah, man.
This is what we need.
One quick thing that might be a bit of a tangent that has come up. Actually, it was a guy that I met down in Dallas at BitBlock Boom. Older guy, met him. He's from California. He's a he's a real estate investor in California, and he's dead set on he wants to convert all of his bit or all of his real estate into Bitcoin. And this guy's like, if I didn't already mention, he's 75 years old. He came to that conference by himself. We've befriended each other, and now we're it's nothing official, but I'm just trying to kind of talk him through what it might look like. Because that's the other piece is you probably know this too, Jason. If you got some capital, unrealized capital gains locked up within real estate, in this guy's case, a lot of it's fully depreciated. I mean, it'd be a large tax bill to convert over to Bitcoin. So we're trying to get creative with how it might look to do. I don't know whether it's just, hey, just pay the taxes on it, or is there a way to, for example, I've gotten him connected with one guy that at least gave the pitch, maybe go into mining, because there's tax benefits. We could Section 179 the equipment and have that offset the cap gains on selling
You
the
want to
real
hear
estate.
you want to hear what I did?
Let's hear it. I want to know.
Yeah, so it depends on what your end goal is,
Yeah.
right? Is it like charity, your kids, what is it? And so this is not helpful if it's your kids, but it's extremely helpful if it's charity. So you can give away a house
Hmm.
through a donor advised fund. You can
Yeah.
hold it in self-custody, multi-sig, open up a DAF with Unchained, and
Hmm.
you hold 100%, it's cold storage. You got one key, Unchained has a key, the DAF has a key. It's they use uh I can't remember. I could tell you. I'm sure I'll think of it, but they use this DAF organization, right?
Yeah.
For a donor advised fund. And then you pay Uncle Sam $0 on
Yeah.
all of the capital gains. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you're
And you
trying to
get
give it
the
to children, you got
donation
to
on the first
pony
year,
up
right?
to Uncle Sam. But uh, yeah, you get the. Mhm. Yes, you do. The year that you make the sale is when you get to count it as charitable donations.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'll have to, because I don't think this guy has any children. So, anyway, I mean, I'm just trying to explore. He came to me with one idea that he had kind of heard online from this consulting guy that kind of sounded a little sketchy to me, where he was like, "Well, I can contribute to this trust and then sell it. Basically, try to do a 1031 into Bitcoin versus real estate, but do it through this complex trust thing." And I was like, I don't know, dude. That
Those
you
things
might not
sketch me
want to be
out.
the yeah, you might not want to be the guinea pig that tries that out and then have to go show up in front of tax court and like argue that that's legit. I know I've heard at least Eric Trump talk about that he would like to see 1031 exchange extended to Bitcoin. That'd be interesting. But all that to say, even the fact that we ran into a guy like that who has gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, showed up to an event by himself at such, at an age that, a lot of us are younger guys. I was just really impressed by that. And the fact that he's like, I want to get into Bitcoin, um, and I want to try to do it the most tax efficient way. So yeah, we will see where that goes.
It's not just for the young bucks.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin is for everyone.
Absolutely. It is. So,
Spans the generations.
so
And Jordan, I
you,
know you
oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask another question, but if you have something to say,
No, you're good. Go for it.
sweet. Well, you said with Bitment right now, your main kind of client is miners, and that's who you're focusing on for building out those products. But as that continues to evolve and as you bring this to market, who do you think is like the ideal, customer for you? Is it any business, or is there a market that you think that would be more ripe than others as it continues to scale?
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm excited, to talk more with Jason, online, offline, because I think really any business with high volume transactions, they're a prime candidate. When I've talked with some of the guys over at Acropolis, for example, and if a company's they just have a treasury strategy, that's 12 journal entries a year to mark up or down the Bitcoin balance on the balance sheet to dollar terms. Our tool is not really helpful for someone like that. An accountant can do that fairly easily. So it's really, for example, I met a guy at BitBlock Boom that came up and said, I can't remember how many he said, call it 10 Bitcoin ATMs in a large city or something. It's like, okay, this guy needs our product because that's a ton of volume. Um, so yeah, anyone who solves the problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, I don't think that Zapright has quite solved the problem of the POS. So like having Bitcoin, they're an invoicing tool, right? So it's good for someone like me who sends
Well,
an invoice for a tax return, but maybe not the coffee shop, right? That needs
yeah,
it
it's
integrated into their.
they don't necessarily integrate with a like a retail point of sale like Toast or Clover or Square or something like that yet. But they
Yeah,
do have a POS tab where you can save it as a hyperlink, and then you could have a phone or an iPad or something
yeah.
beside the POS. So we see this
Mm,
a lot of times, in the credit card processing world, the world that I've lived in for years, where there's proprietary payment processors that these software companies have to they force all their merchants to work with, right? Like salon or mechanic industry or whatever the industry is, right? And the only way around it is to just set up a separate POS, like a separate credit card terminal right next to it. And then you just, let's say you charge the customer $100 on the credit card terminal and you have to manually key in $100 on the POS. It's the exact same thing with Bitcoin. You can accept Bitcoin today. Anyone and everyone, you just through Zapright in a POS in a retail location, you just it doesn't necessarily integrate with now, depending upon the size of the business, that may cause a lot of friction. You have to train a bunch of employees. It's like a big hassle. For smaller businesses, it's going to be way easier. Larger business, a little more friction.
yeah,
Yeah, I
no, that
mean,
makes.
we've been playing with the Zaprite POS in the park in Austin for our drinks and snacks, and it it works great.
Good. Yeah, I mean, because anyone who's billing through Zapright, I figure that that small business is a prime customer for us uh, to do the back end, pulling those transactions into, again, some accounting software, whether it's what they're using today. Um, but I think that our model will have to pretty quickly shift because nobody wants to pay for like a lot of different softwares, right? They want to really pay for um like probably one or two. And so I think there will be some like haste on our end to try to see what it takes to build out the full accounting suite because, if I'm a small business owner and I'm like, well, I'm already paying $70 a month for QuickBooks. I'm going to pay $240 to Zapright. Now I'm going to pay whatever it is for Bitment. It's like, I don't know. Maybe I just continue billing out of QuickBooks, just getting paid in dollars. So I think that's one more hurdle is you don't want to stack too much onto a customer. You probably want to try to simplify things. Oh, and one more would be coin tracker, right? If you're having to
Well,
sell or send any of it for the tax cap gains tax.
what about partnerships? Like I just signed up for, I have a free Fold membership because I'm a Crowd Health member, for example.
Okay.
So I have like Fold's premium account is like completely for free. I get all of that for free because and so there's a synergistic element there between these companies. Like, if you're Zaprite customer, then you get, Bitment for free or whatever that is.
Yeah, no,
Could
I
be
mean,
some
I'm totally open to that.
yeah.
It would be interesting to see because I kind of see Zaprite as the Square kind of
Mm.
product, and then, um, it's obviously a lot of businesses will pay for Square, pay for the equipment to come in, and then Square just takes their fee in the middle, and then all of those transactions then get shot over to QuickBooks. Same with Shopify. So I kind of see Zaprite as filling that void as being, you know, kind of the plug and play version of BTC Pay Server, just because I've messed around with BTC Pay Server and I'm sure I could figure it out, but it's not it's not near as easy as how I set up my Zaprite in probably 5 minutes. And so I kind of see them as playing that role, is doing the payment side, and then whether it's online, in person, POS style, or invoices, and then I see us as we're trying to take QuickBooks out of the equation over time. So yeah, I think that's how I see it playing
How
out.
so for Jordan, you're a CPA. You've worked with
Hmm.
a lot of Bitcoiners. Um, when I brought up Bitcoin to my the first time I brought up Bitcoin to my CPA, okay. This is over the phone, but I could see it so clearly visually. He had his face in his hands, like his heart rate was elevated, his palms were sweaty, and he was like, "Oh God, oh no, not a client that has Bitcoin." Okay. Second CPA, uh, same thing. Now I'm blessed. I'm with Joe at Satoshi Pacioli now, and I
Yeah.
can have all the Bitcoin conversations I want to have. But all the other Jason Kyles out there who don't work with Joe, like, where do you see the role of CPAs evolving as Bitcoin adoption grows? There's there's thousands of these conversations that you know clients are having with their CPA. What do you see that over the next like 5, 10 years looking like?
Yeah. So one small role that we're trying to play, and I can't remember if I mentioned this to you, Jason, while we were in Dallas, but I'm attempting to put on a Bitcoin for Advisors conference starting in 2026. And really, that's born out of what you're describing with accountants, but also a lot of financial advisors that I speak with, um, just not well educated on Bitcoin, and they're also not well educated on why Bitcoin only, and why everything else probably doesn't have a place, you know, in someone's portfolio, or at least like have the chops to explain, proof of work versus proof of stake. And maybe they don't need to get that in depth, but it's at least have the understanding of what this is and why someone might be interested in holding their wealth, and transacting their wealth, in this new money. So we're shooting for late April of next year. I'm really trying to use it as a way to call it some education, but I'm assuming most of the people who show up are going to already be Bitcoiners. They're just working they're a CFP, they're a CPA, um, or they're in insurance, they're an attorney. So I assume that they're probably already going to be in it, but at least allow a place for collaboration. I've been added since I've been going down this road. Joe added me into a Telegram group with probably 40 other Bitcoin accountants. And I was like, dang, I didn't even know you guys were out there. This is awesome. So now, we can bounce ideas off of each other. I want to use it as a way to expose the different tools that are out there. Have Parker come and explain Zaprite, because at the end of the day, Zaprite is going to be sold by accountants. We are targeted by tons of software companies that say your client needs this, and it would actually make your life and your firm much more efficient to use this tool. And it's like, okay, and some of them are like good, some of them aren't good, but we're the ones who generally are like, hey, I want you to, for example, hey, I think we should switch from ADP for payroll. I think we should switch to Gusto, and here's why. Or I think we should switch your
That's
billing from here to
It
Zaprite.
was
And
my
so
CPA who switched me to Gusto.
there you go. Yeah. So I really think people like the folks over at Anchor Watch and Zaprite and our tool. I think that they need to get exposed to as many professionals in the space as possible because again, it's great if you have a tool that solves a really cool problem. But if the normie client doesn't know about it because they went and asked their accountant um, and they were shot down or just they didn't know, maybe they're into Bitcoin, they just didn't know, they don't know the most up-to-date tooling that's out there. It's not super helpful. So yeah, I've looked around. I don't see I know there was a Bitcoin for advisors. I think Pierre Rashad's wife, I'm blanking on her name, put one on maybe in 22 and ran it for a couple years, but last I checked, that's not happening anymore. So I've been reaching out to a lot of people, even the guys over at Sound Advisory. I just think it's a huge, that's another kind of gaping hole in the market of let's get a bunch of people who are incorporating Bitcoin into their business, whether wealth manager, accountant, let's get them all in a room. Let's talk Bitcoin, let's network, let's collaborate together. Because that's how it happens in the real world. I don't do everything. There's even certain things I would push off to a different accounting firm just because they're better at that than I am. So yeah. So we'll see. I think that answered your question, but I think we need something
I
like that to to bring more professionals into the fold. If nothing else, just be educated. You don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole, although you probably will, especially
mhm.
accountants.
I have a friend that's really good at events. His first name starts with the letter J and then it ends with ac. He,
Oh, okay.
he,
Hey, we got
Jack,
the Texas
it's
Energy
that.
Mining Summit coming up next week.
Yeah.
This might be dated by the time this pod comes out, but yeah, no, what you were saying, like the connection that you made with Joe at the park, like that's where these collisions happen, especially in the Bitcoin world, where the industry is still small enough where you can walk up to somebody, introduce yourself, and make a genuine connection. And that
Yeah.
could happen from, to what you were saying, some of the best money you spent at the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit back in January, but it can also just happen at a monthly meetup or at a one-off event that we put on at the park in Nashville or Austin. I mean, it's truly insane the energy that I've found Bitcoiners to have. Because like you, Jordan, I've just been meeting so many people over the last few months that all are kind of we're rowing in the same direction, but we're working on slightly different things. And it's really creating these opportunities for collaboration and saying, oh, that's something that's needed in the market, or oh, wait, that would really help what I'm trying to do. And then you just get each other on Signal or Telegram or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
and you're off and running.
Dude, it's
You're off
crazy.
and running.
I can't say the name because I don't want to dox him. Plus, he's still working at another company full time. But literally, I made my little intro into the Discord for Bitcoin Park back in January once I joined as a member, right? And a guy messaged me individually almost right away. It was like, "Oh, it's very interesting that you're building that accounting software." All of that to say, fast forward 3 months, he's on our team. We just brought him on as the second developer probably 3 weeks ago, and that wouldn't have happened without the connections down at Bitcoin Park. So all that to say, yeah, if anyone's on the fence about joining Bitcoin Park or Nashville or Austin, you definitely should, even if you're not close or right there in the city. I mean, I live in Louisville. I commute into the park in Nashville about once a month, try to make it for bit devs, but it's just been great. And then, I'd love to see something like the park happen in Louisville, but one step at a time, I guess. So,
Well, and there's so many conferences you can go to. Like the point is like making those connections, getting in the real world, seeing where
yes.
the synergy happens, and like things just bubble up. Products are being built, jobs are getting created. There's all kinds of impact and networking that's happening.
Yeah. No, it's huge. So, I love it. I'm glad we did this. I think are we pretty close on time? I don't want to
Yeah,
take
yeah.
too much of your all's time.
We'll let you go. Before we go, Jordan, one final question. If you could wave a magic wand, you mentioned the de minimis, that would be amazing. But other than that, and maybe you could explain to our listeners what that even is, and for
Yeah.
those who don't understand. But if you could change one
How did my
thing,
listeners explain it to me?
Yeah, no, I can talk about that.
yeah, if you could change one thing though about how the U.S. government treats Bitcoin and tax policy around Bitcoin today, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so if I could change it, I would say treat Bitcoin just as a currency so that there's no friction. You spend it the same way you spend your dollars. And there's no reporting, you're not measuring against dollar gain over time or dollar loss over time. It's just a currency. So if I had my like dream, I think that's what I would say. But what's more realistic is a de minimis rule. That's actually already that's in a bill that's already at least in the Senate. It's co-sponsored by I think like five or six different senators, and it's a bipartisan kind of thing. It's not the Bitcoin Act. It's called the Virtual Currency Tax Fairness Act. And it's small. It's like a $200 de minimis rule. Let me define what that means. So anything if that were to pass and it say it'd stay at the $200 limit, that would mean that anything under that limit, any specific transaction under that limit, there's no taxes and there's no reporting. So again, it's kind of a play for you go buy your coffee with Bitcoin, you go buy a beer at the park with Bitcoin, and there's no issues. And honestly, again, that's kind of how it already is now. Again, I would say everyone should report everything to the best of their ability, but just in reality, those small transactions aren't being reported. So they should just go ahead and just rip the band-aid off, pass the de minimis rule, and not require this like overburdensome reporting on just normal people trying to, purchase a beer or a coffee. So I think that's what I would say. We are going to sponsor Bitment will sponsor the BPI event this later this year in June. And I ran into Dennis Porter in Dallas, talked with him a little bit. So I'll be curious to see where everyone's head is at on just all of the policy that pertains to Bitcoin at that event in DC in June. But yeah, I think everyone at this point though can just take a sigh of relief of um obviously no government, no administration is perfect by any stretch, but at least as an industry, we can now know that we're not being targeted. Uh, and I think that is a huge step in the right direction. So I would say I feel good about where we're at with like our existing relationship with the government. But obviously, you can never be too, you should never really trust the government at all. So we should be diligent to continue building the tools and basically go on the offensive to say it's not always going to be like this, and it won't always be like this. And so we should be prepared for the next administration to not be near as friendly. But who knows? Maybe they're forced to be friendly to us because we help them solve their debt problem with bit bonds or something, right?
Hopefully
Maybe
so.
that's the other one on top of my list. The bit bonds piece. I'm sure you all are, or if you're not familiar, we can talk a little bit about it. But I mean, that would be the other a huge wish list to help pay down the debt so that my two kiddos don't have to bear that burden, right?
Borrowing from future generations is like one of the top reasons why I got into Bitcoin. The more I started peeling back,
Yeah,
when I tell people we're all living on credit card debt. Like if you're a citizen of really any country, doesn't matter. You're living in fiat, right?
yeah,
And I use a credit card as a way to kind of connect the dots, right?
yeah,
But it's like imagine if you've amassed so much credit card debt that you're taking on credit cards just to pay interest only on your other credit cards.
yeah. It's
That's
disgusting.
yeah. So
That's all my generation knows.
Yeah, it will be a whole shift in everyone's psyche to have to go back to you save up money before you purchase things, making the switch from this debt-based system to you have to have proof of work, you have to actually have like a job that earns more than you spend, you have to save up, and there's just because I foresee the world being, I think the interest rate, there might be an argument where the interest rate has to be at or above Bitcoin's CAGR to make any sense. Like, why would I lend you money when I could just put it in Bitcoin? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm going to lend you money, as everyone says, like the hurdle rate is Bitcoin's price appreciation. So all that to say, there might be a world where debt goes away just because it's not sustainable. You're not going to pay the interest on that debt. You just have to get back to basics. And if you want to buy a house, you have to save up for it. But the house is going to go down to its utility value because it's not used as a store value anymore, right? So I could talk to you guys forever. So
I
I
know.
love this kind of
I
stuff, by the
truly
way.
think we could literally go all day. Like the sun is setting and we're still just rocking here on this
And
conversation.
we haven't talked about any news stuff, and there's just all kinds. There's always stuff to talk about with Bitcoin, and it's a fun, very energetic world that we found ourselves in.
It's
So
an infinite rabbit hole.
yeah,
Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today, man. We'll have to get you back on here at some point. It's Bitcoin's evolving so fast. I mean, it'll just be a few months maybe.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate
All
your
right.
all's time today and the conversation. Yeah, we'll do it again. And good luck to you, Jack, next week. I know you guys are going to kill it. So
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, thanks for
yeah,
coming on. This has been a ton of fun. I learned a lot.
good, very good. All righty, well, y'all enjoy the rest of your week.
All right,
Talk to you
Jordan.
soon.
Thank you so much, man. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, all right, bye.
See ya.